You're listening to the AfterBuzz TV network, now the largest new media platform on the web, and your #1 source for after-show entertainment.
Very good, Keith Johnson.
The AfterBuzz Studios in Los Angeles, California. Presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is AfterBuzz TV's Betas After Show. We'll break down tonight's episode and get you all the latest news and gossip. And now, another post-game wrap-up show for your favorite TV show. It's AfterBuzz TV's Betas After Show.
Hey there, Betas fans. This is the very, very first AfterBuzz TV Betas After Show. So excited to be here. Love this show. Love that we're doing it. I'm Matt Lieberman. Joining me on the panel this season, we got Patrick Dees.
What is up? How are you, Mr. Lieberman?
I'm doing well.
Excellent.
You're doing well, too. And we have a very special guest here today. We have one of the creators of Betas, Evan Endicott, is here in the studio with us.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Yeah.
So congratulations on the rollout of this show.
Thank
we
you.
absolutely adore it. I think it's like this amazing mix of, you know, grounded, realistic characters with a whole lot of raunch and heart, and it's striking at something that a lot of people know of but don't really know about, if you know what I mean. Like, everyone's aware of the, you know, the tech startup world in San Francisco. They're using these apps every day, but they don't really get a real peek into who these people are and how they interact. You got the social network, not exactly a realistic depiction. It's a little skewed one way, I think, personality-wise. But I'm so excited to be
Slightly
talking about
darker
the show.
than our show.
Yeah, a little bit darker.
I mean, Fincher's known for his lighthearted comedies.
Right.
So
Good old
we took some
Dragon Tide 2 was
inspiration there, but
hilarious.
yeah.
Yeah, so when we finally get to the part where Trey cuts Nash out of BRB, when it gets really, really huge.
Lawyer up, man.
Lawyer up.
Bring it. Absolutely.
I think we actually wrote the line "lawyer up" in an episode, and it immediately got cut.
No,
Like, what are you thinking?
I love
Can't
it.
say that.
Yeah.
No, but like genuine, like very authentically, I really love the show. I was telling you guys earlier, I kind of ran into the show by accident. Somebody said, "Hey, this is like right up your alley," and I'm really glad that somebody pointed me in that direction because it is darkly hilarious.
Yeah, thank you. We like to say it's like Deadwood meets Sailor Moon.
Ooh,
Actually, no.
Okay.
that
We've-
doesn't
we've
make
never
any
said
sense.
that.
That doesn't
I
make
was
any
trying, he was
sense.
doing the mental.
Yeah, I was like, I see
I'm just
that
trying to
makes
throw
no
you,
sense.
Throw you off guard right away.
Mission accomplished.
Is that where you got
Yeah.
that Japanese rope bondage from? Jesus.
Internet research, it's your best friend.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this pilot for a bit, and then we'll move into more of a formal conversation about the show. So we open on Sailing by Christopher Cross, and Nash is trying to work. He is the CTO of
He
BRB.
is the chief technical officer for
Yes.
those of us who are not privy to startup lingo,
You
Well,
nailed it.
which I wasn't before I
Yeah.
started
Is that
writing
right?
this. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So he's freaking out over this shared workspace with all of these, you know, tech wannabes shooting foam darts everywhere.
Nerfs and Cheetos everywhere.
And
Yeah.
and we're immediately drawn into what I think is kind of the key conflict of the episode and potentially of the series is the relationship between Trey and Nash. And Trey's kind of bringing Nash along for the ride. He's like, this guy is amazing. I have ambition. He's going to be able to help me. And I'm wondering how much Nash is aware of this.
Interesting question. I think he's pretty aware of it. Their relationship goes back to Stanford. They dropped out sophomore year. And, you know, the way we've envisioned the backstory, Nash was always sort of stuck inside of this shell, no way to really communicate with other people, antisocial, lots of sort of OCD issues.
Yeah.
And Trey, slightly more savvy. We don't want to paint him as the world's, you know, cleverest, slickest individual, but he's
Right.
certainly...
a level of emotional intelligence is present there. Yeah,
definitely
absolutely.
more of an emotional IQ. And so from the very get-go, he's helped Nash along. Back when they were at Stanford, they created, you know, sort of a primitive version of the app. And it was always to get Nash to meet people. He thought, like, here's a way this kid can actually communicate, which is through code. And so let's build something where he seems to be working on this project that's about tech, but ultimately it's a way for him to meet people. And it was a kind of a primitive version of BRB that we call Wingman.
Yeah.
It's essentially just
okay.
like pickup lines and facts about your classmates. So when you met them, it would tell you like a conversation starter, like an icebreaker.
What I love about that is that now you've got this app and their overall, entrepreneurial thrust, this thing that they're trying to build together, this company, but it's rooted in Trey wanting to help Nash communicate with the world. He's talking about this whole episode, talking about with the merch, about, how do you really connect with people in the real world? And I love that it's rooted in their friendship.
Absolutely. And that's a big part of the arc moving forward. And their relationship is complicated. Sometimes you wonder why the hell they're friends. Other times it's clear that they're yin and yang and they're better together than apart. And I think that's how a lot of relationships work. I mean, I know that with my friends, I gravitate toward people who are far more extroverted or have some element about them that is different than mine. And somehow in that synergy, you become more of a complete person. And that's what we want to explore there.
You see that, though, in a lot. I think that's incredibly, again, I go back to that word authentic over and over again when you're talking about your show, because I see that relationship in a lot of CEOs, CTOs. Like, ultimately, no, they really,
did too.
truly.
For those of you who don't know, Patrick is very well versed in this world because he is the CEO of a tech startup.
I am. So I've gone down that VC route in San Francisco. So again, all of this resonated like to the nth degree with when I started this episode. But like, especially like, I find as a CEO, I'm definitely the extrovert, the product vision guy, but don't bore me with the details. And I definitely need the Nashes of the world. And it's not like a youth perspective. It's this whole let's achieve a common goal kind of synergy.
Definitely. And I think, if Trey has a fatal flaw, it is that wanting to gloss over the details and get to the big picture success. And that's where, Nash's sort of OCD actually keeps them in check because he wants the product to be good. We saw that a lot too. And all the time we did research, there was usually, more often than not, co-founders in these apps and things. And so you've got usually two very different personality types trying to make it happen.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that relationship is very cleanly explained, like without taking too much time, when they're talking about that project sophomore year that Nash refused to turn in until it was perfect, and Trey just went ahead and did it behind his back. He betrayed him because otherwise he would have failed.
Right, he needed that push to keep going.
Absolutely.
Adverbs.
Well, I think it's Trey's greatest strength and also potentially his greatest weakness is that he's not a fan of rules. He doesn't really have much respect for them. He doesn't really have much respect for authority. Ultimately, he feels that he knows best. It's not always the truth, but at least so far, it's been working out for him.
That is absolutely true. He's definitely my way or the highway kind of person, if I can trot out an old cliche. But blind ambition.
Yes.
And we're interested in how that gets him in trouble, but also how it ends up bringing this team along because it's kind of a ragtag crew, and they do need a leader like that. So
yeah. Now we've got Hobbs, who's played by John Daly, who's just awesome on the show.
Great get, by
Love
the
this
way.
guy.
Absolutely.
He's the best. We got super lucky there.
Yeah. Was it always your intention to have an older member of this team and to play out this kind of almost burnt out type who's tried before and failed?
Absolutely. From the get-go, that character was there in the pitch when we first went into the room with our conceptions of the characters. We thought it was just interesting, too, that in that world, you're like ancient in your 30s.
Yeah.
And it really is true. We went to a lot of these... Actually, where we shot the show, this is kind of interesting, was a communal workplace. So a lot of the stuff you see there in that intro with Nash, is exactly what we witnessed going on.
Oh, wow.
That's the old Google building. And, they moved to Venice, and so now it's a whole bunch of startups. But anyway, we thought, you walk around these places, and everyone's it looks like a college dorm, like a freshman type scenario. And so we were like, are we too old to write this? We wanted to maybe come up with a character who we could relate to, but that, in this world would sort of be
a dinosaur,
but also have some wisdom, having been through it before. There's so much trend hopping, and there's ups and downs, and it's this crazy volatile industry. And he's a guy who you find out subsequently has been at a number of startups and has sort of seen it. So he's a little more jaded because it's last week's pets.com or whatever is next week's Facebook, and you just never know. And so we wanted to have a voice like that.
And was it when John Daly came in for the audition? Was it just over? It was that it has to be him. It has to be Hobbs.
It actually was, but he came in fairly late in the process. We were having a really difficult time casting the role, and he'd actually been mentioned by one of our network executives, Joe Lewis, who was just a big fan of his stand-up and his various comedy videos.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that familiar with him, and he came in, and there was just an energy that you couldn't not look at. It was compelling.
Did he come in with the beard?
No. He was doing Kroll Show and didn't have the beard, and that actually led to a whole series of events, which is now known as Beardgate, on the pilot, which was that he grew the beard for us, then was forced by Kroll to shave.
Oh, man.
And so the beard in the pilot is actually a simulacrum.
A simulacrum.
Wow, there's a multi-syllabic word for you.
That is a fake beard.
That is a fake beard. It
like
didn't
an
look
80s
fake.
vagina.
No, we did a great job. And then it's been authentic since.
So good.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of HD photos
Kroll
of his...
can suck it. I'm not really saying that, Nick Kroll, if for some reason you're listening to this podcast.
Right.
It was, but there was a lot of like teeth gnashing and hair pulling about what are we going to do if Hobbs can't have a beard. It's how we saw the character. That sounds ridiculous.
No, but it works.
But then if you've seen his face without a beard, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And he also looks like a child, too. He doesn't play into this like a relic without that. He's like,
Right.
So his arc actually, to me, seems like one of the more interesting things. Initially, out of the gate, I thought I was gonna identify with Trey. I wear a lot of hoodies, I'm that guy. But like, I'm really excited to see where he goes.
Yeah, Hobbs goes through, man, a lot. I don't want to spoil too much, but
Sure.
definitely through the ringer. And you find out a lot about where he's come from and where he's going, and his relationship with Mitchell, where we see him as kind of like a bad father figure,
Yeah. Sure.
you know, a little bit, but also has something to teach him, and vice versa. I think Mitchell's naivete and optimism are something that Hobbs has lost touch with.
Yeah.
And you know, we want to like bring him back from the jaded edge a little bit as the show goes on.
Well, I really love their relationship. I think that a character like Hobbs is necessary for the show. It raises the relative stakes of everyone around him because he can't handle his life's over essentially. If he can't he can't handle another failure. And then to have somebody like Mitchell who's so in his shell but like has so much joy left, you know, like trying to bring that out and also at the same time screwing with him a hell of a lot, I think is going to help bring Hobbs back from that brink. It's like reawakening maybe something that his ex-wife took from him. And we'll get more into their relationship on the next episode.
Yeah, definitely. I mean that the scene in the bathroom in the
Yeah.
pilot was a fairly late addition to the script, and we were looking at different ways. You know, one of the challenges you run into whenever you're doing a pilot episode is just how to cram in character backstory, and it can be very difficult. And you don't want to be on the nose about it and expository. And that scene came along late in the game, and I thought John just really knocked it out of the park. It added a layer that, you know, the character doesn't have up until that scene, and really lets you know that there are stakes for him.
Yes.
And therefore stakes for the company.
Yeah, I love that scene is one of my favorites in the entire episode. Actually, when he mentioned the old yeller, but like leading up to that too was so great. It really showed his range. He comes from the spilling the soda on the what is Scrawny Depp or whatever.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh
That's
man,
Dane.
the shirt's hand painted. And they go right from that
Dane.
into like again brilliantly introducing kind of that backstory and that like what the stakes are for him.
Yeah, that was a really fun one to shoot. I want to give a shout out to Dane, played by Tyson Ritter of All American Rejects, the rock band.
man.
So a rock star in his spare time when he's not acting up a storm.
okay.
And another really lucky casting get where, you know, he kind of came to us by whimsy and the hard work of our casting director, Alyssa, and just killed it. One of the funniest guys I've ever met. And,
Great.
and consistently elevated a character that we initially thought was just going to be kind of a one-joke
Yeah, his
pony.
line
Yeah.
readings are
Yeah.
so kind of out there.
Yeah.
This is hand painted, bro.
So good, but again, authentic. Like no
Yeah.
part of me
Yeah.
sounds
Totally
feels
bought it.
surprised. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
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 All right, so we got this awesome cast. We have a mission, and you set up, you know, sort of like the world of these entrepreneurs very slickly by showing Trey using the Valet Me app, which he has so much contempt for. It's because it's like, but that's the thing, is like the app works perfectly, but it's flawed in its conception.
Right.
And he's smart enough to get it, and like jaded and angry enough that he's going to tell anyone that will listen.
Right.
And so they've got this app, and they want to get up and running. You know, George Murchison is this guy who, you know, he's funded a bunch of tech startups. He's very, very rich. Everyone knows about him.
Yeah.
And he's gonna crash this party, and he's lying to Nash to get him there, forcing him to wear pants. And Nash
I don't own pants.
I don't own pants. Right away. Okay. Yeah, I loved that. And you kind of got like this nice little window into who Trey is when he has that moment alone in his room, and he's just at the whiteboard, and he's like realizing the gravity of his situation. He really has no plan. He has no connection to Murchison. He knows two people who are supposed to be there, and he's
Google founders, is that correct?
Yeah.
It's Larry Page,
Page.
made up assistant, Shamit Rambi.
Yeah.
Who I still hope
Unbelievable.
to introduce as a character
I know.
someday.
You
Absolutely, that would be incredible.
But like you'd think that, I mean, even a valet guy, right, would know in that world.
Well, that was sort of the joke, though. Like, we thought that it was interesting how anonymous some of these people are. You know, they
Yeah.
invent these things that change our lives that we use every day. I mean, I use Google more than probably any other product,
Absolutely.
family out there in the world. And like, I had no idea what they look like before I started researching the show. And that is like, I mean, that's kind of a fascinating thing about it. It's a very different kind of celebrity. If you're in San Francisco, of course, people would recognize him on the street. But I don't think here anyone would.
No, I don't know.
Larry
what he
Page
looks
could
like.
just cruise around. And so we thought that was just a funny conceit that, who are these people that,
absolutely.
rule our lives?
Yeah. So they crash this party, and George Murchison is this, leftover from the San Francisco LSD days.
Sure.
He apparently was very formative in its creation. And now he's rocking out with Moby.
One
he's
word,
doing
Moby.
lead flute in this jam band with Moby, who is just awesome in this episode.
Thank
he's
you.
so funny, he's an amazing get.
He was a pleasure to work with, yeah. And I also want to give a shout out to Ed Begley, who's a comic genius and
I
is just
love
great
Ed
as the
Begley,
merchant.
Jr.
Only gets better as it goes on,
Great.
and really elevated that character. But yeah, there are those types in that world too, which is also distinct from kind of the LA millionaire scene, and that we observed up in San Fran, which is guys like Roger McNamee, who you'll see give a TED talk, and they're just wearing sweatpants and like a Grateful Dead shirt. And these guys are worth hundreds of millions of dollars and are investing in the way the future is designed, and are incredibly smart. And so we thought a character like that was just fun to play with, and it really has proven to be a rich source of comedy for us. And Moby was great. Awesome of him to do it. He was hilarious. All of the stuff about effing an octopus, as Matt might say, was all improv, and he came armed with all kinds of material that was even crazier that we couldn't use.
Yeah.
And
Who would have known Moby, comic genius?
yeah, I did not expect it.
He should do skits on his next album, like a rap album.
Also didn't know he could tear up the blues guitar. He was fully. We asked him what instrument he wanted to play, because we were like, "What do you want? You want like turntables with a keyboard?" And he was like, "No, man, I want to play guitar."
Now, did you guys write for Moby, or did he come just like you just turned him loose? Just hey, here you go.
Yeah, we wrote a couple things, but he really went off script, and also just had a lot of fun hamming it up in like the jam band conceit. I think like really playing. Because that was a terrible song that we found, and we knew it, and that was the beauty of it. But he had no shame in just like shredding it up and then having a blast. So he was great.
Cool. So we were introduced. We kind of glossed over this scene, but I want to bring her into it since we're talking about the party. We have Lisa, who we come to learn is an employee of George Murchison. She helps advise him on what to invest in, what not to invest in. She's looking at David Chu and the Valemi app. And, in this scene, we get a sense of who Trey is. It's obvious that she doesn't want to talk to anybody, but he has to prove his point. He has to be right. And like many, I think, young geniuses, the ego is a bit bigger than the brain sometimes.
Yeah.
And I love their interplay together, because it's foot and mouth disorder. It's bad news.
Yeah, he's got a lot of that.
Yeah.
A chronic case, you might say.
Now, was that Bar Dukin, right? Was that the?
Bar
So is this
Dukin.
a real thing?
No, that's an inside joke for the gamers out there. that I hope they appreciate.
I appreciated it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of our generation would identify with that. I'd love that.
And that is funny. I remember just pitching name after name for that.
I'm really
What's
bummed it
called?
doesn't exist.
And a writer's
You
assistant.
could start it, Patrick.
Why not? I mean, that's right. If we're talking about entrepreneurship.
There you go. One of our writer's assistants threw that out, and immediately I was like, "Case closed. It's called Bar Dukin." And the art department was like, "What the hell does that mean?" And like, they didn't know how to spell it. They didn't think it was funny. And then once like the joke was explained, we were like, "Trust us.
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of thing that people who know this and come from this culture will love."
It's so funny. This show has more Japanese references than any other comedy I think I've ever seen.
Well, is that something like you would like? How do you gauge the the
How
success
can you
of
not
that
love
joke.
Japan?
Right, I'll give you that.
That's true.
Now you
They're
focus
so
testing
weird.
this? Like, so, when you see that this plays well, you're getting an audience reaction. That was just all gut. Yeah, I knew that Bardukan was going to be a thing. People would get it. This is my vision.
I think it's early yet, but I'm hoping to see that reaction. I'm hoping that people will, want to buy the merch or whatever.
I
prove
want to
that
buy
you're
the merch.
interested? Yeah.
I would buy the merch.
Art's working on it, They got the coasters, they got the
what you did there.
t-shirts. They designed a custom neon fireball Hadouken
What?
over the door.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
cool.
Beautiful
I want
work.
that.
Yeah. So,
And something I really dug from the pilot too. I thought that was really cool, and also instantly hooked me was that like a Google Maps style establishing shot.
Oh,
is
yeah,
how
yeah.
I knew that was Bardukan.
yeah. How did that come about?
I thought it was so cool, and then you guys eventually end up moving away from it. Right?
Yeah, we don't really use it subsequently. That's something we talked about. Would it get annoying every time we change locations, or would it just be a way to establish new locations?
Yeah.
And
Right.
we thought about slotting it in there, but ultimately decided we didn't need it, and a lot of our episodes run plenty long as it is.
Sure.
So we felt like it would just interrupt the flow. But I really like it in the pilot. I mean, it
Yeah.
sets
Mhm.
it
It
sets,
sets
the
up the
world.
world.
Yeah, very
Exactly.
much so. Very much so.
And again, you kind of like touched on this earlier. Why hasn't a show like this been made? And we thought it's so prevalent now in the culture that you don't have to really care about tech specifically, and you don't have to know how startups work to relate to it because it's just in our everyday lives. And that was another one of those details that I think it's like you immediately see that, and it just makes you feel like it's of now and,
Right.
and of your world.
There's all these little details that I think just, like segments of millions of people will immediately identify with. All the millions of people who played Tiny Wings got a little love in the pilot.
Or who are into Kumbaku.
Exactly. People who love very hot Japanese rope bondage are all about your show.
Now, there is a gaming reference or two in like every episode that I've seen thus far. Is that you guys all big gamers, or where's this coming from?
I actually am a gamer.
Okay.
Josh is not. He has a PS3, but he says that he owns a couple games which he like hasn't played because his fear is that if he ever dips in, he'll like never come
He'll
out.
lose himself.
Yeah, right.
And then
Smart man.
And then he had a daughter who's now 2, and I think that occupies most of his free
Right,
time. But I've been trying to tell him a little stress relief would be good after hours.
He teaches her how to play Call of Duty Ghosts.
right.
But I am definitely, and certainly for Mitchell's character, it's important. And so
What was the team deathmatch, the Far Cry 3 team deathmatch hashtag intense?
Don't ever say that again.
Don't ever say that out loud.
say that out loud.
Yeah.
And that's funny. We got a little bit dinged for some of the like over clevery, talking in the show, but I actually had an intern at my former job who would say hashtag things out loud.
No, I think
And
we all
said
have had
to him,
friends
like,
that have like,
no,
hey, that's
dude.
so real. Just don't do that.
The only thing I ever say, I say hashtag blessed, but that's just more like that's just making fun of it. I'm like, hashtag blessed. I'm just so blessed with everything in my life.
No, but I do think there's like a generational thing that people don't really know that sort of lol speak and tech speak and culture has really bled into the younger generation.
Absolutely.
And when I work with 20 and 22-year-old kids, like they talk like this.
Yeah.
And so I know it seems like we're trying too hard to a certain segment of the adult critical population, but I actually think that in some ways it's
how it
accurate.
is, yeah.
And I'm not endorsing it.
Yeah,
but every time someone says hashtag, I want to punch them.
As you should.
But it seemed like, that's Mitchell.
Right.
Yeah.
That's who he is.
That's who he is. He's he's an awkward dude. He is trying too hard.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
definitely trying to.
Yes.
Yeah. So he and Mickey, she's the hot girl who works at Mind Hub. She's not a part of BRB. She's not a part of the company.
Yeah.
But she's a marketer, social media. Like what was her function before she kind of became part of the group?
Yeah, we saw her as somebody who did marketing work.
Okay.
I'm suddenly blanking on what you call that when you handle all the social media stuff.
Social
Community
media
manager.
Community
maybe.
manager.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so we saw her as kind of freelancing around and doing that for different places.
Okay.
Because she has a sort of forte for making noise and getting noticed and hatching schemes. And then Dane, who she's kind of having the thing with in the pilot, or seemingly so, is a designer and is doing that at a different startup. So they're just kind of in the communal workspace, providing a little bit of both object of obsession for Mitchell and a target for Hobbs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The chess with the dick pic was one of my favorite
Yeah,
things.
no,
I'm trying to
in
get the
12
dick pic in
moves. I love that.
It's like, please don't call. What was her quote? Please don't call my vag damp. It makes it sound like the Dagobah system was one of the funniest things I've heard on a television show, maybe ever. And he takes
so glad
notice.
you
Mitchell
like
all of a
that.
sudden was like impressed. He's like, he perks up a little bit, like this chick is worth talking to. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he already knew, but like that's the thing is like she just gets cooler the more she opens her mouth. You know, he realizes, you know what? I made the right choice of who to crush on. I picked the right one.
Yeah.
Oh,
And we have
but
a
he's
lot
so
of
hopeless.
a lot of fun with her as the series goes on, and she actually has some of our some of the most layers of any of the characters we get into, which is
kidding.
great.
Well, yeah, because she reveals the least, I think, of anyone
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
episodes that I've seen. So there's a lot of room to, build her out. Versus Lisa, who, within the first 2 episodes, we get a lot of a sense of who she is, what fuels her, what drives her.
Yeah.
She wants to be taken seriously. She's got this kind of failed relationship that she's coming out of, where, he was doing his own thing. He wasn't really supporting her, but, her career is more important to her than, say, a guy.
Yeah.
She left Chicago because of this job, or he moved to Chicago for grad school?
He moved to Chicago for grad school, and rather than follow, she has stayed to pursue her career.
Right.
And I think that's a dilemma that's pretty relatable these days. I've actually seen that exact thing go down. I like to say I'm not original enough to really come up with my own stuff, so I tend to just steal from life.
You steal from the best.
But hopefully that's why it feels authentic.
No, it does. And
It's all stolen.
How did you write her? I think she's one of the more well written. I mean, they're all well written characters, but she feels
She's way better than the rest of them.
way better.
I like
Well,
her.
I
The
thought
rest,
what was
man.
cool about her was because I felt like you might have had an example or had somebody that was like, hey, we're going to model after her, because she manages that in that community. A lot of the females. How to languages feel like are serious. They try and retain some level of femininity because it's hyper competitive, very
Yes.
testosterone driven. The tech sector is almost predominantly run by men. So when a woman gets to that level, she almost has that like, I'm gonna eat my young mentality while
Yeah.
trying to maintain a relationship, but not appear vulnerable. And that's why she just felt really complex. And again, I keep going back to it, but authentic. Like
She has to strap on a pair. Sort
Oh,
of, to be in that
100%.
world.
There you go.
I think actually that's kind of from my Hollywood experience, because I have really good friends who are female executives, and it's a similarly
I know that game too.
male
Yeah.
dominated world,
Yeah.
just as the agencies are, and just knowing people who've kind of had to adapt to that lifestyle, like being cutthroat and kind of like
You have to be tough. You have to keep
Yeah.
your head on a swivel.
Yep.
Everyone's trying to axe you. You need to be the first, on top of anything. You have to be the leader of the pack.
Totally.
You cannot be doubted. You have to play a perfect game.
Yeah.
You have to play a perfect game. And I think that it's caused her to withdraw a lot from, maybe the things that she really enjoys. And it's what I like that Trey brings out in her is he's a rascal, wise-ass kid, and she's, like, bemused by this, but it also touches something, which...
Yeah, I think it reminds her of kind of how she used to be when she was a little more loose.
Yeah.
Like her old collegiate days, and that there's a part of her life that is now missing because she's become, sort of driven by this ambitious goal.
Yeah.
And just speaking to characters, she is not nearly this well written, but one of my favorite characters of all time is Faye Dunaway's character in Network. So I do like the idea of the sort of brassy, hyper intelligent woman, working in the sort of sharky business world. It's
Yep.
just
Right.
something I'm a big fan of. But yeah.
Okay, I'm a big fan of her too. So we're at this party. Trey discovers that this woman that he failed to not quite hit on is basically the key to him having time with the merch. Realizes he doesn't have it, and he makes a Hail Mary play, and he basically calls Murchison out in front of all of his onlookers as he's cutting open this beautiful trout. The
Ferrari of
Ferrari
fish.
of trout. No, the
Yes.
Ferrari
Yeah,
of trout.
Okay,
Yes. And
So good.
it's just it's a ballsy move. It's a make or break kind of a moment. Where he's like, you're in second place. You've been missing out, and this is just going to be another one of those moments. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
5 minutes. And, they make this pitch, which, though it is built on stolen Facebook user data, somebody like Murchison, who was a rebel and did help make LSD, he appreciates that.
Yes.
It's not perfect, but he does appreciate that these guys are willing to bend the system to make their thing happen.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a little bit of that. Trey reminds him of in his youthful, like, rascally days.
Right.
And there's
Yeah.
a certain respect for his moxie to actually try to pull this off. And then the fact that the app works, of course, is what, really clinches the deal. But I think there's a grudging respect from the moment he gets in that room that, okay, I'll give you some time, kid, because, I know what it's like to beat you.
Yeah.
Right.
And if anything, we look at Murchison as maybe the money and the success has made him a little soft. When you can kick back with the Ferrari of Trout and the ladies and Moby playing your party,
Right.
it's easy to sort of lose that killer instinct. And that's what drove drove him in his early years, and so here's a chance to maybe get a little bit of that edge back.
Yeah. Now, here's what I'm wondering, because you, in writing this show, you have to decide what kind of app are they making.
Yes.
You know, would you use BRB? Like what drove you to make that app the core of our show? Because that the app is essentially a character in this show.
Yeah.
We're watching it grow. We want it to succeed.
Totally.
We invest in it.
Well, first of all, Josh and I knew really early on that it would have to be a social app because we wanted it to reflect the social lives of our characters and be something that everyone could relate to, and that could then we could just build character out of in the ways that we used it. Felt like if they were working on Valet Me or something, it would quickly become the kind of MacGuffin you never address again, like, you know, Dunder Mifflin. Like,
oh
nobody
no,
wants to
we
hear about
ran out of
paper,
parking
right?
spaces.
Yeah.
We need to come up with more parking spaces before the VC gets here.
Yeah. So it was always like, how do we take something that everybody uses but is really tied into their social lives, and not to get too heady about it, but like when we were pitching the show and thinking about the show, we were really like concerned with how things like friendship have become subverted by technology. That like you gather friends, quote unquote, on Facebook, and that people are obsessed with getting likes, and you know, like we just thought that was so rich, and no one had explored that, and so we knew from the get-go that it would be an app in that sphere. Then we had to figure something out, and we came up with the app long before, of course, the pilot aired. I do feel like since then there's a lot of things that actually really are very similar, like Tinder or something.
Yeah.
But basically didn't exist when we were inventing it. So it was interesting because this happened multiple times where we were sort of riffing on something, and then like boom, the next day it's kind of out there in the world, and you realize these ideas are floating around and basically are just every day. If you have it, it's got to be going tomorrow, or you've missed the boat. But yeah, we just thought that it was an app we would use. It seemed like an interesting way to, I guess, just Trey's theory that people have become too obsessed with their online lives, and how do you connect people in the real world was something that really appealed to us.
Great.
Yeah.
So they appeal to Murchison through the one way that is pretty much without fail.
Universal.
Yes.
Universal language.
Yes, through his little brain, realizing, you know, he's wasting all these time with these hot blonde models, which, I mean, not a horrible time waster.
I mean, there are worse ways to
worse ways to while away your time.
I would agree.
But he had missed out on a woman who was just as into Kimbaku as he was.
I
Yeah.
love that you've got that down. You've got Kambaku just on the tip of the
Well,
tongue.
I didn't
Like, I
until
feel like
he
you're-
said it a couple times, and now I've got it. I was just, if you listen back, and as hardcore AfterBuzz TV fans, right? You go back earlier in the episode, I kept saying Japanese rope bondage. This was the first time I actually said
Okay.
Kimbaku.
I was
authority.
impressed. I was impressed. I feel like you're exposing a whole generation
Yeah.
to this.
He
is what you're doing.
learns.
Right.
Yes.
I like it. We learn, we adapt.
It's a learning computer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's was there a question?
No, it wasn't really a question. It's just kind of like this is again just recapping the show. But you know, I love that moment of just like it seems like all is lost, like they did their best.
Yeah.
And you know, he reaches out to Nash again. You know, like trying to make a connection in the real world, and Nash shuts him out because he's so frustrated.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes in
Yeah.
the pilot. Actually, we shot that. Boy, it was like 3 a.m. in Highland Park, and we were freezing tired. It had been a super long day. We didn't have many takes left, really, to go. And I thought those guys just killed it. That's Joe Dinicol and Karin Sony, who play Trey and Nash, respectively, and are just phenomenal. But I love that we can have those dramatic moments in this show, and I think they're just as earned and valuable as the comedy.
I do too, and in fact, especially when Murchison sends him the text, like all of a sudden,
Yeah.
like that for me was like this moment where like, oh, this show's got a lot of heart. It's really funny, but you know, I think
Yeah.
that you can appreciate it on a whole lot of levels.
Yeah. And,
Absolutely.
And they give good algorithm, and then just end credits. So it's left kind of ambiguous as to like, you know, he appreciates the app, but we don't really learn until the second episode, which we'll talk
Absolutely.
about on a separate podcast, that they actually have made it. Now,
Yeah, it's just that glimmer of hope.
yeah.
You know?
Now, I wasn't aware watching the pilot that they were competing for a spot in a program. I thought that they were actively looking for funding. Was that
were-
a decision that was made pre-pilot or post-pilot?
Post-pilot.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say when they approach him, they're just hoping to get money.
Right. Yeah.
And then it turns out that what he's willing to offer them really is, hey, I have this accelerator, which is, you know, a very real thing, as you probably know from the startup world, where investors will incubate maybe a dozen companies. There's actually one in Venice that we visited for inspiration. called Amplify. And that's basically what he's willing to offer. Like, no, you guys haven't earned enough for me to just write you a check.
Right.
But why don't you come here and work on the app and make it better, and then we'll see what happens. So that's what they get themselves into in episode 2.
Cool. Patrick, do you have any other just episode 1 centric questions before we move into kind of like just more general interview stuff?
I know. I think that's fine.
Okay, cool. So I would love to talk about, because this is one of the first series of its kind. Amazon started making series. They had their big, sort of like hunt for pilot scripts. I don't know how many were selected. I think, something like 20 scripts became like 8 pilots, which, yours was one of. And then they had this big public offering where anyone...
Battle Royale.
Yeah,
a
exactly.
Hunger Game.
A Hunger Game, if you will, controlled by Americans who got to watch all the pilots and decide which ones they wanted to see turned into series.
Yes.
So, like...
God bless democracy.
Yes.
That's all I can say.
Yes. So let's go back to, you're writing this script, you and Josh, and Amazon launches this, open submission policy. Like, what drew you to Amazon? Was it just,
Our situation is a little unusual.
Okay.
So they had the scenario in which, you could be a guy sitting in your basement in Ohio, write a script and send it in. We actually had been approached by the producer, Michael London, who had an idea. I'd met him working on Sideways, and he had an idea for, hey, what about a show set in this world? Would you be interested in writing it? And Josh and I said, yeah, that sounds awesome. And we developed a pitch and took that out, to a lot of the usual places.
Yeah.
Your FXs, your HBOs,
Right.
your Showtimes. And he had been in talks with Amazon, who had told him, hey, we're launching original programming. We're really looking, for producers with experience and to tell great stories. We want to compete with those other cable networks. And so we went in a slightly more official capacity.
more formal?
Yeah, we had Michael London on board to produce. We had Michael Lehman on board to direct the pilot. And so we had some experience, and then you had us in the room who are like, who the hell are these guys?
Right.
But fortunately, they liked the pitch. And I think because it was set in a world that they all come from and work in every day, there was also a little bit of, we didn't have to explain a lot of it.
Sure.
Sure.
In a way, when you're pitching it to HBO and Showtime, they're kind of were like, what is this? What's a Twitter? And
Right. But with Amazon, it felt like a natural extension of their brand.
yeah,
maybe.
it felt like, oh, here's a world we want to talk about, and
Yeah.
no one's done it, so that's really exciting. We could be on the forefront in a couple of ways, and so we were just really lucky that they were willing to take a shot.
Now, what does that mean? You look like when you're actually pitching the show? You're coming to Amazon. Paint me a picture, if you will.
Sure.
So I'm Amazon.
You're Amazon.
And
You're located.
I want some shows.
up in Sherman Oaks.
I'm up
there
in
in the
Sherman Oaks.
Galleria next to a PF Chang's.
I am.
That's where their offices are.
High tech.
I know that PF Chang's very, very well.
And so you walk in, and they've got the whiteboard walls and everything you would sort of expect from your tech startup, except it's much, much bigger.
Yeah.
Sure.
A lot of folks in an open, cubicle situation. They're typing away, coding away. And we went in a conference room, and we told them basically, here's the characters, here's the world, here's what we think the pilot could look like, here's some story ideas, here's some episodic ideas. We talked a lot about theme and why it was sort of relevant to the
Sure.
culture. But we did lay out all the characters that from the series pretty much in that room.
So it's still 30,000 feet kind of level, right? Like you're not getting granular, not individual story beats. It's like, hey, maybe here's what the arc looks like for a season. Here's maybe what the pilot specifically could
Definitely.
look like.
We did give them slightly more specific pilot beats, but then once they got on board, we kind of retooled everything, besides the characters. So that stuff was much more, here's an example of.
Right. Right.
We'd
Sure.
actually written an earlier
It's
version
good pantomime of
Yeah.
here's an
You like
example
that?
of it.
We'd actually written an earlier version that's much more broad and ridiculous, and I would someday like to table read for the world.
I would attend said table read.
I would attend said table read too.
But so the great thing about them was they really encourage us to push all those things we're talking about, the drama, the authenticity, and really kind of compete in that space with HBO and Showtime, which
Yeah.
is the stuff I love to watch. So that was really exciting.
Yeah, well, amen. Well, so then what does that look like too? So once I, as Amazon, have said, okay, yeah, we dig it, we're on board.
Sure.
What level of control am I exercising over, the direction of the show? Do they just kind of hands off go do it?
No, it's very similar to any other place. I did development for years and years.
Yes.
So it's very similar in that they gave notes on the outline.
Okay.
Couple rounds of those. Then you went off and wrote a draft, and then there was
Notes on that.
Notes on that. And
Sure.
we probably did 6 or 7 drafts, really before we got the green light. And there were steps in between there. We brought showrunners on who had a lot of experience, Alan Cohen and Alan Friedland, because Josh and I had never run a show. So as creators, we weren't really equipped to do that. So then there were more script work after they came
Sure.
on board, and just it kept evolving like that. So they were very hands-on notes throughout that whole process.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then, you shoot this pilot. You get, hopefully a warm response from the network from it.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, so we're going to open this up for the public. This has never been done before. Were you just kind of crapping your pants a
Shit your
little
drawers
bit?
terrified. Yeah, that is the worst.
Because it's like coming from development, you can kind of gauge what the reaction is going to be. The types of people who are drawn to development, because I did development as well in the reality world. So it's like, okay, I can gauge my odds a little bit by betting on personalities. But then when you're dealing with people, real people, it's a whole different ballgame.
Totally, and really just having no idea what sort of metrics would be used. How many people will watch this stuff? What are they looking for? We didn't. A lot of that was very sort of opaque to us, and so all we knew was we were proud of the show we'd made. So it was really, really nice that it was embraced, because that's not always the case.
Well, what kind of analytics are you privy to, right? Do they just open up the proverbial kimono and say, like, hey, here's how many views, or what are they passing along to you?
Proverbial kimono.
Is there a proverb about the kimono?
Yes.
Okay.
So many proverbs.
They gave us a lot of the information that they were able to glean from that whole pilot testing process. But oddly enough, we didn't get it or look at it until way late in the season.
Oh, interesting.
So it's almost like, oh, well, that's interesting to know, but Hey.
So literally, the pilot aired, and you guys are just in the dark until somebody from Amazon calls and is like, "Yep."
Pretty much.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
it was a little crazy. And so they don't like to talk about hard numbers and things like that, but we did get a lot of feedback about what people liked, didn't like as much, and I think that the through line that we kept getting was people really responded to the characters. And then after they put the first 3 up, that was the same thing. It was like, by episode 3, I love the characters more than I did episode 1. And that's what you want. I think any kind of show that's going to have longevity, it's because you connect with these
Absolutely.
people.
You build an attachment, you identify, you want them to succeed.
Yeah.
All right. We unfortunately have to wrap up this episode, but Evan is going to be on the second episode, which we're about to tape on.
With my lovely co-creator.
Fantastic.
Yes, Josh Stoddard. So thank you to everybody for joining us.
Absolutely.
We're going to be dropping this tomorrow with episode 2 as well, so we're going to come right back in the studio and tape that. But as we're wrapping up, Patrick, where can the people find you?
I'm at P to the D's on Twitter, and I host a a video game podcast you can find on iTunes called Pixel by Pixel.
Wonderful. And Evan, where can the people find you?
I am at Notorious EJE at Twitter. There.
Yeah, you are.
All right. And the show's official
I laughed
Twitter.
at your handle.
Yeah.
The
I'm not
show's
notorious.
official Twitter is at Betas,
Yes.
so at BETAS. You can find me on Twitter at Matt Lieberman. That's MattLieberman. You can also find me here on AfterBuzz TV on the Sleepy Hollow, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Almost Human after shows.
All of the shows.
All of the shows.
We call him Captain AfterBuzz.
Don't call me Captain AfterBuzz.
Tweeted
No
him
one
Captain AfterBuzz.
If anyone tweets at me Captain AfterBuzz, you're off the list of good people.
I'm doing it.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us. We will see you in the next episode. Good night.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.
Thank you for watching AfterBuzz TV on YouTube. For more of your favorite after shows and interviews, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to share your opinion on the episode in the comment section below here. We'd love to see what you guys are buzzing about. Thanks again. Buzz you later.